Disclaimer. I am a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. Alright, let's go ahead and join the call.
That I sent her the link.
Hey, Calvin.
Okay, there we go. Hey, Riley.
Hey, what's happening?
Not much. Okay, guys, this is my friend Riley. I'm also, let me send Buck the link now to join. So Riley's also live on her channel. If you guys don't already subscribe to her, I highly encourage it.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, so Riley's going to sort of moderate, but also I felt like to the conversation we're going to be having, because I know there's a lot of this, you know, there's a lot of debate about, you know, Buck spreading turf stuff, being friends with Ariel. So that's definitely going to be brought up. And I think that with that conversation in mind, it's kind of important to have someone who transitioned the opposite way. So Riley's a trans woman. And I felt, you know, I feel like, first of all, Riley always has good perspectives on things. I mean, you have different opinions than me, definitely different opinions than Buck. So I wanted to have like a broader spectrum of like just people's experiences to add to the conversation. So I sent Buck the link. I sent him the link, so we'll see when he joins here.
All right, but yeah, no, I definitely appreciate it. And you know, I'll be perfectly honest at the onset, right? Like, I know that there are some things that you and I don't necessarily agree with, but I've really enjoyed all of my conversations with you. I felt like they've been super productive, and yeah, I don't know, I feel like we could have a good time with us.
Yes. Oh wait, yeah, we're gonna, y'all. I see the chat, y'all. We're gonna, don't worry. And if you have anything you want to ask Buck about, I have Ryan and Noah moderating the chat. So Ryan and Noah, text me if you see any really good things to address. If anyone brings up something that we want to address, definitely text that to me. I'm still waiting on Buck. And also, I wanted to say this. I had a lot of people messaging me, oh, the presidential debates, blah, blah, blah. Me and Riley been talked about this already. We're going to make sure the stream ends by like 8:15, because I'm sorry, this is way less important than the presidential debate. If you live in America, please go watch it. Please go watch the debate, especially if you are of voting age. Oh, here we go. Hello, Buck.
Friend, how are you?
I'm good. So I have Riley here on the stream as well.
Hi, Riley. Nice to meet you. I'm good. Right on.
So I told you that Riley was going to moderate, and I also just figured so Riley's a trans woman. I figured we could have like different people's perspectives, because I wanted to, you know, I didn't want to, like, at least on my channel, I'm not like structuring this as a debate, but I want to have like a productive conversation. You know what I mean?
Right on. Right on.
We all have different thoughts and views on things, and I feel like people say a lot of things about you, Buck, and I see it. And I feel like above all else, I can't really remember the last time that you went on someone's channel and talked, like a prominent trans YouTuber, and like shared how you felt about things. So I think you definitely, I have a lot of questions for you. I'm sure the chat has a lot of questions for you.
Excellent.
And I already said this to Riley as well, but I usually try to like not like dictate like how long the streams are, but tonight the presidential debates are happening, so I figured we could try to keep it to like an hour, probably like end around like 8:15.
I appreciate that, because it's important. I have to go, and we all do. We all need to watch.
Yeah, I definitely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you are of voting age, especially here in America, you know, you need to be watching that and make this is an important election. Y'all need to have an educated vote.
Thank you, my friend, for saying that. I totally appreciate you. I appreciate you giving me space here to talk. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there. But, you know, me and you I've actually been a jerk to you and really made my amends to you. I hope that you know that. And, you know, it's just a difficult space these days. The internet creates
so long ago, though.
Yeah,
so if anyone doesn't know, but so I'm actually really curious when that first happened.
Yeah.
Like, what had people said? So anyone who doesn't know about this live stream, right? And it's iconic.
Iconic.
Nowadays we can look back at it and it's kind of funny because we're like good now. But I was always curious, like, what did people say to you that gave you that impression or like made you like mad at me? Do you remember it all?
Dude, I'm so embarrassed by it, but here I'm gonna totally put myself in that position, because humiliation is the best way to actually become a better person. So
and I'm also just saying, I think it's funny now. So I'm telling you guys, if anyone's bent on this is the last thing you should be bent on.
Well, I'm the one who brought it up, so it's all good. That being said, the most important thing is that me and you are good, which we are, which says that you're a stand-up guy because you let me apologize to you, which was really says a lot to me about you. And I immediately, so what happened was I was just like on a feed and people were saying, you got to see this Kalvin guy. And I didn't even know about you because I was in my own space, blah, blah, blah. Then you were just going off on, I think they're called trenders or something. And there was all this stuff going on. And I was like, that's not cool, dude. Like, you can't do that. Because that was before I really dove into what's happening in this community. It was like, I don't know, maybe it was a year or so ago. I had
longer than that. It was like 2 years.
Dude, I don't even have any idea what was going on in this community because I was in my own space. You know, I was just doing my own thing. And then that's what happened. And I miss my point being here is that I misunderstood what you were doing. And instead of me taking the time to listen to you, I just jumped on you, which is really, if anyone could take anything from that lesson is this: listen before you fucking speak. Pardon me, before you speak. You know, you got to listen. And I didn't listen to you and I jumped on you. So that being said, I will again publicly apologize for that. It was inappropriate behavior from me. So
no, like that's completely fine. And like I said, I'm not like bent on that at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I figured, well, first of all, you know, what have you been up to? Like, that's my first question. I know you're doing like tons of different stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So as of late, what have you been up to?
Well, right now, really, I'm focusing on all of my businesses. You know, I work in the sexual wellness field and I create products for trans men. So that's really a big deal. And since COVID, things have just been going because those are the things that are selling the most. That said, I'm also in the cannabis business. So I created a new business out in Palm Springs, which is a delivery service. So that being said, I work in cannabis, I work in sexual wellness, and those are my two big businesses. And it's full time, constantly moving.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, I'm on the internet speaking my opinions, which again, they are my opinions about what is going on. And I'm not, you know, the say end all be all of anything. It's just my opinions.
Right. And so this was another thing that I was very curious by, because like obviously when you first did that live stream, it seems that what you were mad at me for is very much like, I feel like your opinions are so different. So I mean, just out of curiosity, like right now, what issues are like on your mind? Like what topics of discussion? One thing a lot of people wanted to know about, and I heard really conflicting things about this, the book by Abigail Shrier, Irreversible Damage. Did you read that? Were you? Some people said you didn't like it. Some people said you did like it.
Never have I said that. You see how the internet is? Wow, dude. I've never said I didn't like it. I'm actually in the book. I actually am very good friends with Abigail. That being said, of course I read the book. That said, me and you are going to have different opinions on that. So my opinion is that I don't agree with everything she says. Of course not. But what I do think is this: we need to talk about what is happening. And what is happening as an elder person who transitioned such a long time ago. I'm not saying I've never said the way I do it is the way it's done. I've said it is my story and the way my experience happened. Today, you kids have so much great, amazing stuff. You have so many amazing opportunities. You don't ever have to go what I went through. That being said, I really believe in safety in transition. And so a lot of times I don't see the safety. I see sort of this way that everyone can transition, whether or not you're having any mental health care. I'm big on mental health care. And so I'm not really sure if self-ID is such a positive thing. And again, my opinion, everything here is just me being an older person, maybe somebody who's a little more conservative, maybe somebody who really kind of tries to see the future in this situation. And some of the things can be irreversible, such as surgery and those things. And I'm just worried if somebody makes the wrong choice, it could affect my transition as well as yours on some level. And people could start looking at us in a way that, is this something that kids need to do? Or is this something that people need to do? And that's really my number one thought is, could it affect people in our community in a way that we don't get the opportunity to do it anymore?
Hey, Buck, can I ask you a couple questions real quick? Just to follow up on that. Yeah, because I just want to make sure that we're not like strawmanning here, because like I know that you mentioned that you want to make sure that no one is undergoing any kind of transition or any kind of procedure that would be bad or unwarranted, right? And I completely agree with you, right? We want to make sure that we're doing everything that is medically advised and that we're just following what the medical consensus is. But I mean, I also don't think that there's really any major issues with that right now, right? Like overwhelmingly, the reports and the studies show that like overwhelmingly people who medically transition right now are overwhelmingly positive results. The detransition rates are down to like less than 3 or 4%. Like overwhelmingly right now, the people who actually medically transition are very positive in receiving that, right? So I just want to make sure, like, yes, I understand that like that's a valid concern, that we want to make sure that people aren't being exposed to these kinds of dangers, but like that also doesn't really seem to be that big of a concern nowadays. Like doctors are doing what they're supposed to.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that one because first off, studies, that's a whole other space. So who knows who's doing the studies? Where these studies come from? Studies can actually be, pushed to a certain way. We all probably know that. Detransition. No, we don't have enough studies on that. And I get so many emails from kids who are transitioning. So I have a different thought on that. And I do think we don't have the oversight I think we need to have, because you might not be seeing that now. But again, as a guy who's older and having to deal with, I see things, I think, in a different way. And so I am nervous. Maybe now everything is great, but what about maybe a couple of years from now, even 5 years from now? What if we have a huge group of detransitioners? How will that affect us in our community?
Well, I mean, like I can cite you like over 10 studies right now that show overwhelmingly that like it's not just a matter of the fact that like studies might one-off show that gender affirmation is good for trans people and that transition is beneficial. It's that there's the overwhelming academic consensus that that's the case, right? It's not just like one or two studies, right? Like to say that we just can't trust studies is to say that we just can't trust like academia in general, right? And that seems like a bit
then I'm going to tell you about academia. And so that's a whole other conversation. I'm not necessarily 100% on academia, and academia gets this space in the world that they're the end all be all. And academia is a whole other space. And I'm not sure if you're academic or not, but there's a hierarchy within academia. And so that being said, sometimes they get looked at as the smarter. I'm a guy that didn't even graduate high school. I'm very self-learned. I don't have any academic background, nothing yet. I'm a self-made man on so many levels. I'm an entrepreneur. I created stuff. I'm very functioning in the world. So I'm not necessarily 100% on board with all academic studies. I think we need more medical studies. I think we need studies showing what age group should kids start to take, hormones or hormone blockers. I'm not necessarily on board with hormone blockers.
We already have those.
Wait, so question. What is your opinion on kids transitioning? Like elaborate on that.
Yeah. What age group are you talking about?
Like your opinion right now, like where do you stand on that issue?
So I do have an issue, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it, but I do have a concern with youngsters, and that could be anywhere from the age of 10 to possibly 14, maybe even lower than that, 10 and below. I have a kid that I work with here in Los Angeles who's 8 years old on hormone blockers, and he's doing great. Everything is awesome. I see him taking the next level. He went through a large amount of mental health care. He went through a system. Parents I talked to today say that they go to say they're self-IDing as trans, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor just starts giving them hormone blockers without any mental health care, any sort of understand. The parents, I'm a parent. I have an 8-year-old kid. I can understand.
Wait, you do?
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old.
I didn't actually know that.
I'm actually a real dad. It's not like I'm a daddy. I'm a real dad. Yeah. So
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, right on. I don't really talk about it a lot just because,
it's like private, personal.
Yeah, it's not necessarily private, but, there's wingnuts out there, and I just don't want to put my kid into a position to, be. And my kid is away from all of this stuff. My kid doesn't need to be seeing all of this stuff. But that being said, I'm around an 8-year-old, and I see the things that happen, and I see influential things that could happen, or I just see things, So for me, I'm not saying nobody should transition. I'm saying transition it saved my life. It saved Calvin's life. It saved a lot of people's lives. But that being said, when I did it, there was a structure. I don't see such a structure anymore. And again, I know I sound like an old man. I sound conservative, but I'm all about structure. And I think that will help us in the long run, if that makes sense.
Can you elaborate what you mean by there isn't a structure?
Sure. Mental health care being number one. I do think kids should be in mental health care before they start taking any type of medical transitioning, whether that be hormone blockers, hormones, whatever. I think the first step needs to be mental health care, and that's not on the table.
Where's that on the table?
Canada, United States. There's many doctors who do not send their kids to mental health care. It is not.
I will say that I can see both sides of this, because I think that like there is this like wide idea that like, oh, most trans people are in mental health care. And I will agree that like with Riley, like a lot of endocrinologists kind of step in and do provide a mental health check. Like they will, even if it's not a psychologist or a counselor, an endocrinologist kind of knows the questions to ask. But I will say though, when I and this is just my outside, like this is just my experience.
Sure.
I'm just gonna say, like here in Maryland, when I started transitioning, I started T at 16, and I did go to a psychologist, but when my endocrinologist, my psychologist are completely separate.
Yeah.
And when I started at my endocrinologist, they didn't require me to have talked to a therapist or anything. It was like all informed consent. So as long as your parents signed, you could go on it. So I don't know how it is in California. Riley's also in Maryland, by the way. So yeah, I don't know about all other states, but I do.
It changes state to state. It's state to state, totally different.
I definitely am for kids transitioning. I mean, I it would be so hypocritical of me. It would be hypocritical of me to say no. But I agree with what you say there. Like, and I'm sure Riley agrees with this. I'm sure everyone in the chat agrees with this, that there does need to be a lot of, like, for medical transition, there needs to be a lot of mental health advocacy.
Yeah.
Because you really don't want.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's just my really concern. And again, coming from an old space back in the day, oh my God, we had to get a note from our therapist. I mean, what you call gatekeeping. But I'll be honest with you, I think it was a great way that I did it. I had to get a note from my therapist, which I had to see for 2 years. I had to live as Buck for 2 years. I had to walk the world that way. Then I could go to my hormone doctor, who I was his first. He had never even touched a trans man. He was mostly with trans women. And so, you know, he called me his guinea pig, and it was a scary space to be in. He's like, dude, I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, me neither. Let's just do it. So, you know, my mantra was, I'll just kill myself if it doesn't work out, which I'm sure a lot of kids, again, I don't want kids not to be happy, and I don't want kids not to transition if that's not their space. I'm just being that conservative voice that says we also need to talk to the rest of the world, because they're not seeing what me and you see. They're seeing other things. They're seeing people say kids shouldn't transition, blah. So again, we're not having any kind of like basic conversation with the rest of the world. We're just telling the rest of the world, basically, go F yourself, and this is what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. But I think educating and understanding that people are worried for people to detransition, are worried to take the wrong step, are worried that someone's going to do something that's going to be detrimental to their health and the rest of their life. So, you know, that's how I look at it. And I'm not, again, not the end all be all of anything, only my opinions about how things what I think should be done.
Just to give some credibility to the people in chat, because there's some people in my chat talking about the benefits of something like informed consent, right? And I'll confess, I got HRT originally from informed consent. I went to therapy, but that was optional. I did that on my own accord. And I would make the argument, I think a lot of people would make the argument that informed consent can be good if you come from an area where A, it can be really hard to get your family on board with seeing a therapist beforehand, or B, you know, like therapy can cost a lot of money, right? Like even if you have like Blue Cross Blue Shield, like when I did that and I Blue Cross Blue Shield, like therapy would still run sometimes like $50, $60 a session. And that was for like the cheaper option in the city, right? So I mean, like, I think that there might be an argument that informed consent can still be good, provided that children are able to the extent that they're able to, or I guess people in general, get mental health that they need later on, right? Like, isn't there a benefit for informed consent for those sorts of situations?
Sure. I think age-wise, I don't think informed consent should be for an 8-year-old, but I do think probably a 15 or 16-year-old, yeah.
I think that's the standard right now.
Well,
I know that when I got it, I had to be over the age of 18.
Right, and you're in Maryland, not Canada.
That was in Tennessee. Well, I mean, that was in Tennessee.
Yeah, it was a different state. It was
okay, right. So again, remember, we got to go back to state has different things going on. And that being said, yeah, a 16-year-old, I wouldn't say a 16-year-old doesn't know himself. Probably does know himself, and probably is trans if they're saying that. But again, how do we know anything? Do you not think the internet has some kind of power right now in the way kids? I mean, you guys are all in the internet. Meaning that, do you think that people can be shown things that they might not know or might not think about, and then sort of maybe think things about that and say, well, is that me? Is that not? I mean, okay, basically what I'm saying is, can a kid not think they're trans and then see you guys and say, well, maybe I'm trans, and then immediately want to be trans?
Well,
do you think that that's possible?
I mean, the best evidence for that right now is like the study of rapid onset gender dysphoria, and everyone has like widely debunked it, right? Like it's widely seen in the academic community to be like a load of horseshit, right? Like it's a very biased pool of study. They like recruited people. They didn't even interview trans people. They looked at parents from like very trans exclusionary radical feminist blogs, right, to gather that information. So I gather like it's possible, but there's no evidence to
Well,
support
why are
that
we
right
not
now.
doing studies then? Why is
Well,
our
the
own
current studies, like
community-
the best studies that are available right now show that like when people do transition for whatever reason, right, that's overwhelmingly positive, right? That the effects are overwhelmingly positive and people don't detransition. Those kind of studies
But
don't
we're
take
only
into account.
doing those studies for a very specific time. What about detransitioners?
No, we know that trans people only detransition less than 3 or 4% of the time on average.
I need to see that study. And
Yeah.
again, these are new studies. These are brand new studies. We're only having studies from academia, which I'm going to tell you again is a very, very space that is very biased and very much in its own space.
Wait,
so
are you just impugning all of academia?
No, I'm not at all.
This
I
is
just
getting so heated.
I'm just clarifying.
No, my friend, it's not heated. I'm not heated at all.
Yeah, no, I
It's just my opinion.
But yeah, I can link you a systematic literature
course,
review of
yeah,
all peer-reviewed articles published in
Great.
English between 1991 and June 2017.
Great,
That assesses...
and I'll send you some articles, and then we can do a whole like thing about what's right and what's wrong, because again, it all comes down to what you're reading. I could read everything on that side, and it can literally change my mind to that, or I could read on that side, and it can literally. Are we?
Do you have any available? Do you have any of those available?
Yeah, sure. I can do that when we get off.
I think one thing that like because I'll say, Buck, I've read a lot of like Riley studies and stuff like that, and I think it is important to note that like, and I feel like this goes for everyone's side, that like the majority of trans people that transition are happy, you know, and it's life-saving. But one thing I will say though is that I think that like hearing 3 to 4%, it feels really small because I mean it is a small percentage, but those are still real people. And I think a big thing is that a lot of those people that detransition are the people that get on the internet and start sharing their experience. So it seems bigger than it is, because a lot of times happy trans people will kind of just like be stealth and not really talk about it. Like I feel like there's a ton of trans people that just aren't part of the trans community online. They just transition and they live their life.
Right.
So I think that like I think that well, number one, I think it's important to address detransitioners. I don't think and I'll vouch for Riley. I don't think she's trying to like not say that, because
no, I don't think that.
No, I'm not saying that.
No, not at all.
It benefits all trans people if we could get that detransition rate to 0%. If we could get the detransition rate to 0%, I think that would benefit all of us, because then it makes our community look good, you know?
Yes, that's my point. My point is, all I want is people to transition for the right reason. Now, I can't steer anybody into that space, but what I can say I see is when they started saying rapid onset gender dysphoria, of course, that just sounds totally insane. Who was saying that? Parents. So again, I always go back to the parents because I'm a parent. So that being said, you know, we forget the parents in this story. And if you remember your parents, Kalvin or Riley, or my parents in the 60s, I transitioned in the early 90s, and I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Can you imagine what my parents went through? And so parents are still going through that today. All of a sudden their kid comes home from school and says, "Mom, I'm trans. I need to take hormones and I need to cut off my breasts." I mean, these are letters I get from parents. And so, you know, I'm thinking, how do we start to have this conversation with parents so they don't feel lost and they understand that this can actually help their child function in the world in a much better way? But there's no information for parents. It's like parents are being left out of the conversation, and we can't do that. We have to be careful of that.
The one thing, and I know what you're saying. And, you know, I think that like the one thing I'm going to say here is that, you know, I've seen people saying bad things about you, calling turf, but this is my thing about you. Okay. This goes to my chat too. And this goes to everyone that's watching. I have denounced Ariel. I don't know if you know that, Buck, but me and Ariel used to be really good friends.
Oh no, I'm sad.
It's not that I think Ariel has a bad heart or that she's just, an overall just horrible person. I don't think that about Ariel at all.
Okay.
But I think that for a cisgender lesbian who doesn't want to date trans people, I think that like she talks a lot about trans people, like an overwhelming majority. a lot, it's so like not in her lane. But for you, you're a transgender man. So I think that having trans people and the problem with Ariel, and this is my issue with the book. Okay, this is my issue with the book, and I want to ask you about the book.
Sure, yeah, great.
This was why a lot of people asked you to have me on here, because I talked about the book. I think the book is transphobic. Okay. Not that the book doesn't make some good points, because when I first started reading the book, I went into it with like as open of a mind that I could. Okay. Because I'm like, okay, I don't want to say phrase this wrong. TERFs, the problem with a lot of these like TERF to TERF rhetoric, more so trans what's it called? Trans exclusionary radical feminism. Yeah, but I hate the word TERF because people are gonna hear me say TERF and be like, it's a slur, and it's like, well, you are a trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's what you are. So my problem with the book is that I think that the ROGD thing, okay, and Riley, I'm actually curious about your opinion on this. And for anyone in the chat that's like, why is Riley talking so much? I initially had Riley here as a moderator, you know what I mean? But Riley also is a trans woman, and TERF stuff and any trans discussion affects MTF people just as much as it affects FTM people. And I want to have, at least when I have a discussion, I want to have a side for everybody. I want to have someone that represents everybody.
Excellent.
And I also, Riley, I recently found Riley's channel, and I wanted to give her a boost. You know what I mean? Like, I really like her channel. I really like that mostly that Riley, you really believe in, like, you have things to back up what you say. I really respect that. And you know what I mean?
And I appreciate being able to talk to you both, right? Like, I can come off as heated sometimes. I don't want to come off like any bad
Actually,
blood or
you didn't. Actually, you don't.
Okay, awesome.
No,
I just see the chat.
Yeah, I don't want people to get the wrong impression.
Not even, Riley. I think you're awesome. I love that you have your stuff down. You literally sent me that study. That means that you care. Look, we all might not get along with everything, but what is our ultimate goal here? Our ultimate goal is to live happy, to create a better world, and so that other people can have what we have. That's my ultimate goal, and I don't hate anybody. I might disagree, but I don't hate, and I just want to make sure that we all kind of understand the ultimate goal. If you're coming from this way, Kalvin's coming from this way, and I'm coming from this way, but our ultimate goal is this right here at the top. And we should all be able to have different opinions about what's happening now in it's our community. It's not yours or yours. It's our community. So if we don't have these discussions, which are hard to have because people don't seem to be able to have conversation anymore. Just because we disagree doesn't mean we hate each other. It just means we disagree. It's a really actually adult. This is an adult conversation, and I totally appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what I was saying here, the book talked so much about ROGD. Like the book, that was kind of the basis of the book. Right. And my issue with ROGD is that like this phenomenon that they're describing, right? This like statistical increase in people born female identifying as trans. Yeah. I mean, I can see that that's a real increase. There is like an actual statistical increase there, but my issue with the radical feminists, like the TERFs, is that they took that and they ran with it and they built a narrative that has a lot of transphobic undertones. So that was my issue with the book, is that I kept reading it and it really, in some sections, it felt like, okay, I can see that, you're trying to address a real issue here. But on the other side of that, I noticed, and it was in the influencer chapter a lot that I really got mad, is because she goes and cites like a ton of these trans influencers. You know Chase Ross and Ty I'm sure you probably know these names. Yeah, I know. And she misgenders them and kind of paints trans influencers as like, I think her wording was like the drug and surgery boosters of the trans world. Yeah. And I know that some people might kind of fit that label if they're, but I personally haven't really seen people, at least trans influencers, I haven't really seen too many of them like encouraging an unsafe path of transition. I mean, most of the time, me, you, Riley, any other trans influencer. I have a bunch of my friends in chat right now. Shout out to Noah, Sam, and Ryan, all in the chat, all trans YouTubers. I think the biggest thing that we do here is try to provide a space for people to feel seen and to be able to relate to an experience. Because for me, I was so like trans YouTube for me was so like important because it made me feel like I wasn't alone. You know what I mean? It really made me feel like there were other people. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were about the way she described like you know, especially like the trans influencers that she mentions in the book, and then just kind of the ways that she was a little
the
bit
tone of the book. I think you're trying to say the tone.
Transphobic. Yeah,
right. The tone of the book. Well, you know, again, you got to understand where it's coming from. Now, again, I'm friends with Abigail, and you know, she lives in Los Angeles where I live, and so we've spent time together. And she is not transphobic. The book might seem to be transphobic, and it's coming from a space of a parent who also has concerns about things that are happening. Now, these are the things that we always have to understand. What is the objective of books, and where are people coming from when they write the books? Yeah, 100% things in that book could come off as transphobic to somebody who says, no, that's not right, this isn't happening. But instead of us getting angry at that, let's look at it and say, what are the concerns coming out of this book? And how can you and I, us three here, or whoever else is listening here, address this in order to let people know this is not true. This is not true. This is actually going to save someone's life. And maybe, no, I'm going to say this. I do think kids can be influenced on the internet, whether it's trans, whether it's video gaming, whether, again, I have an 8-year-old. So, you know what I mean? Like, I see influence from the internet. And I'm not saying all trans kids are influenced from the internet, but I personally agree some might be. Most definitely influenced in this situation. And so that's a slippery slope. And it's also really, you are powerful, Kalvin. You are very powerful, whether you know that or not. And you have a voice. And the voice that you have can influence on some level, some.
I think
you're important.
All trans influencers, regardless of what.
But you specifically are very important. People look up to you. People see you. People hear you. And I know, and I do think on some level that is a huge responsibility. And I think you know that. I do think you know that.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
Can I ask a question on that? Because I mean, like, we're talking about trans influencers, and I agree with Kalvin, right? Like, they are very important. They're the thing that helped me when I was very young, and getting through a lot of what I was doing. But right now, we're framing it as sort of like this thing to be concerned about. But I'm wondering if that really is the case, right? Like, we're assuming when we are making that sort of when we're expressing that sort of a concern that that like trans influencers are convincing, in this case, children that they are something that they're not. But we don't really know that that's the case, right?
We don't. 100% we don't. Again, remember, it's people's opinions. Nobody knows anything. I transitioned 25 years ago. So all of a sudden there's all this trans stuff. People are like, what? And so there could be many things happening here. I mean, anything from the internet to just that now it's talked about more. There's more spaces for people to start to talk about this. I mean, you know, we talked about, I was gender fluid back in the day before I transitioned. So these things a lot of these things are not new.
Did you identify as gender fluid like back in the day?
Back in the day, dude, before I became a dude, when I was a lesbian.
I want to know about your opinion on non-binary people as well. Like I mentioned.
Oh yeah, ask me, dude, because that's a huge thing.
Just in general, like what are your thoughts?
I have no issues with non-binary. I don't know how that got derailed. I have no idea how that got derailed. But that became the stamp of Buck. You are non-binary. You hate non-binaries. I do not. You know how many non-binary people are in my life? That's insane. But you know how it's easy to sort of manipulate the conversation. It's very easy to do. It's very easy to take things out of context. I've been dealing with this community for 20 years since I started doing, you know, my adult work. And that 20 years ago was a whole other thing I had to deal with. Trans men were not happy about my adult work 20 years ago. They got mad at me and said, you're representing all of us and everyone's going to think we all have vaginas. And I'm like, what? Where did Buck Angel, the man with a vagina, where's that have anything to do with the community? But you see, we're always sensitive in communities. Always when somebody is higher or has a bigger voice, people get very sensitive around that situation. So today we have more influencers and more of these things happening. And so I think that, and I will say, I do think kids can be influenced. I don't know how or when or where or why, but kids can be influenced. And that's my own personal opinion and my own thing that I see around children.
Right.
Can I ask a question going back to something that you said earlier that I'm actually interested in? You said that you knew Abigail and that you said that she wasn't transphobic in your opinion. I want to explore that just a little bit. So first, can you say like why that is? Because my impression from her book would seem to suggest the other way.
Sure, of course it does.
You met her in person?
Oh yeah, I know her. I hang out with her. I totally hang out. We go to coffee and hang out. And so we talk about these things. And so I personally, just because of my personal friendship with her, I don't think she's transphobic. She respects what I do. She respects people in this community. She just has a concern. So concerns are opinions. And she's entitled to that opinion, and she's entitled to that concern, just as we are. This is, I think, a lot of the problem in the world today. You have to have pushback in order to grow. I've had pushback my whole life. It's why I am this dude with thick skin. Because I've had pushback on, I mean, God, come on. I had pushback transitioning 25 years ago. Can you imagine? People thought I was a freak. People wanted to kill me. I can just go on and on. And so that still happens today, but I've had a lot of pushback. Pushback creates conversation, and pushback makes you think about things. So I don't personally think she's transphobic. I think I can see how you could take the book as transphobic, but I think it's a concern more than it is a transphobia.
Could she have expressed her concern without misgendering like numerous trans influencers in her
Well,
influencer
probably
section?
Yes, but again, I didn't write the book.
But she wrote the book. She wrote the book.
Yeah.
Have you
so
talked
I'm
to
not
her
sure
about that? Like, has she mentioned, like, because does she know about
I can ask her. Give me some questions to ask her. I would love. Why don't you get her on your show?
Just because I don't know. I mean, I would be open to that. You know what I mean? But I kind of have this feeling of like, I feel like she's one of those people, because she did this to Chase Ross. And this is just, I'm saying this objectively from what his experience was, is that she can be, and the sad thing is that like, this is kind of how I feel about Ariel, and it kind of comes into it. Ariel to me has always been respectful. She would never misgender me. She would support me. She supported my transition. She supported my friends. You know what I mean? But then would turn around and say things and do things on her channel that were kind of in contradiction to that.
Yeah, right.
You know, which kind of bothered me. It's like, if you're going to support me as a trans person, you got to support other trans people too before I'm going to endorse you. You know what I mean? I think people throw around the term transphobic. And someone said this in the chat. Thanks for the super chat. But someone said, we're not going to disagree until we can all agree on the definition of transphobia.
Thank you.
I mean? And so I know Riley has a definition of transphobia. I think my definition of transphobia would probably line up more with Riley's, because what my issue with the book was that, in my opinion, transphobia is not just like misgendering someone on purpose, but I think that my biggest thing is like, if you would say or do something that could put someone in the position to feel dysphoric, and you do that knowingly, I feel like that is an act of transphobia.
Okay, sure.
One of my things about the book was the misgendering, and that those undertones was very much like, she could have made some good points, but she then like ruined kind of her credibility within the trans community of like, you know, using those undertones. And so, you know, I think that like, if you have a relationship with her, like, and I feel like you're the type of person where there's a lot of people you have good relationships with, you have a lot of connections within the trans community and people that surround it. And so, you know, I'm sure that, you know, you don't want her misgendering people as well. Like, you know, you're trans yourself. So it's, you know, but you gotta, I'm just curious. I'm really curious and I would like to talk to her. If she wants to talk, like, I would be open to talk to her. And give her a place to further. For me, at least, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of people in the trans community that are really on the left. I don't say that because I feel like politics, your opinion on the trans community isn't your
Right on. I agree.
Right on.
But, you know, there's people, and within the ideas of the trans community, there's people that are following the more really progressive side, people that are more on the conservative side, like Blair White. You know, she's way on the conservative side of the trans community. But then I'm sure there's other issues, and I know that there are other issues. Blair's more social. Yeah,
Blair's super conservative. Yeah, totally. But I'm actually friends with Blair. I'm friends with pretty much everybody.
Well, I am too. And that's the thing about Blair. Another reason I'm friends with Blair is because, like I said, she's transgender. So it's in her lane. Even if I don't agree with everything Blair says, I think trans people, it's in their lane to discuss trans issues.
That's right. But then, and I get that, and I totally respect that. But again, we're going to have these people, whether it's Abigail, I don't care if it's Joe Blow, it doesn't matter. We're going to have people pushing against us right now because what they see is different than what you and I see. And that's what I see. And I don't know if it's just because of my age and I'm not necessarily in what you people here are into. I have a whole other situation happening. I have such a wide variety of friends, of political views, of things that, you know, I'm always listening also to people who don't necessarily like us. And I see what they have to say. And then so I can kind of, I love to educate. I love it. So like people will say, I'm a woman. They say it all the time on Twitter. Dude, you're a woman. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever you want. That's why I think the thing that happened was I wrote, what makes me a real, or I'm not a real man, or something.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, because you see, I put it in quotes, real. Somebody said, you're not a real man. I'm like, really? I'm not.
How would you define?
How exactly? That is an awesome question.
You personally.
Me, how I define my maleness or how I am a man by how I feel and how I walk the world. And I don't need anybody's. I don't need for anybody to tell me I'm okay. I don't need anybody to tell me like, yeah, that's the right way to do it. I know exactly what I'm doing. And that's what everybody should do. Live your life the way you want to live it. I don't need anybody to tell me I'm a man or not, but if someone wants to call me a lady, I'm like, dude, I'm an ugly lady. You go right ahead if that makes you feel fine. I don't really care.
Girl, me too.
I've grown out of that spot. But that being said, the newer generation isn't, and misgendering sucks and it hurts and it's horrible. Or using someone's old name from before. All of those things are hurtful. I went through all of that. So that being said, when somebody does that, they're doing it on purpose. They're not doing it, when someone misgenders you, most of the time they're doing it on purpose. Unless you walk in and you look female, but you're presenting as male, you can get misgendered, and that's a real thing. And that's something we should talk about, because people are going to misgender you if you don't look the sort of gender you're trying to present.
Yeah. I mean, here's my thing. Like, I think that, and maybe this is my perspective on it. I think that, like, when it comes to the misgendering stuff, and I do want to circle back around to the tweet, because I'm more curious about how you, because the tweet was like, because someone said, I pulled it up here, real men don't have vaginas, and then you coded it and said, who said I was a real man? So,
right.
So is it you say that because you feel like is it because
because what's real, first off. Secondly, I said it because I am biologically female. As you know, I'm attached to my biology. I believe in biology. You won't talk me out of that. It is something that I transitioned because I was born female. Bottom line, you can say whatever you choose to say about your own life. But for me, I was born a woman. I hated my life. I could not survive. I tried 2 suicide attempts. I was home. I mean, I could go on and on. That being said, today, it saved my life, but I was biologically born female.
And so the modern scientific consensus is actually like, it's not that clear, right? Like
that's just what I said, Riley. You can think what you like to think.
Well, it's not about what I think. It's about where
modern
scientific consensus. No, I mean, this is about where science is at, right? Like this is about.
No, it's about what you think.
No, it's about what scientists and people who study this think.
Okay, well, we disagree to agree.
What do you define as? Well, here's my question: what do you define as biologically female? Because I feel like that is really, because like when I refer to myself, like I don't say biologically female, I'll use like assigned female at birth.
Sure.
Mostly because like I can acknowledge any day of the week that I was born a female. You know what I mean? But the reason that because I used to do the same thing, like I'd say that a lot, I make that assertion a lot. And what made me like think differently about this, and I didn't know if you've heard this argument, I wanted to ask you about that because the reason I use now like assigned female at birth rather than like biologically female is because I feel like biological is just such a like broad term. Like people could say biological female, but there's so many aspects of someone's biology. You know what I mean? Like, like you take testosterone, you know what I mean? Those and hormones are a biological part of a human body.
Right.
And there are cis men that have to take hormone supplements. Right. So like, if those cis men are biologically male, and that hormones are still biologically a male part of them, I'd say that like if you have testosterone as the main hormone in your body, that part of you, like your hormonal makeup, is male for them. You know what I mean? Especially if you've had a hysterectomy, because then you're not even producing estrogen. Right. And so same like, what's another secondary sex characteristics? You know what I mean? Like that's another part of someone's biology. And if you have male secondary sex characteristics, well, that part of you is more on the side of biologically male. So I just don't think it's so cut and dry, which is why like I don't like go around policing how people label themselves. If you want to say you're biologically female, and if you identify with like, I know you say like, oh, I'm a man with a vagina all the time, you say that, and like if that makes you comfortable, who am I to like say that you shouldn't do that. And I think
That's
that
right.
you make it very clear. I'll say this. You do make it very clear a lot of the time. I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
And I don't really like when trans people like do say it as like they're trying to talk about everybody. Because I know
That's
you say
right.
yourself.
I always make that point. I'm so happy that you said that. It's important for people to understand. You can think what you like. I know my own story. I know how I've lived, where I'm at, and these things. There are youngsters out there who totally attach to me and want to be just the way I did it and not necessarily the way you do it or necessarily do it. And some are for you and some are you. We need to have all varieties in our community. We're making a monolithic, like crazy community where we all have to talk alike, we all have to be alike. There's this. No. We're like every other kind of community out there. We have different thought process. We have different people. Some people will never transition medically. Some will. All of these things are very important to the health of this community. And when we start shutting voices down because you don't like that I say I'm a biological female, or I don't like that you say I'm assigned at birth, and then that's just bullshit behavior because now we're nitpicking each other. We can't do that. We cannot do that.
Could I talk about, all right, so I completely agree with the idea that like we want to preserve the health of the community, right?
Yes.
I 100% believe that. Like we're all here, we want what's best for the trans community, like bottom line, right?
Yes.
Here's, I guess, like the main issue with that kind of an argument, right? With the biological argument, right?
Okay.
So you're familiar with Ben Shapiro, right?
Sure.
He will go around and other people like him will make all sorts of arguments about how because trans people are a biological sex, that therefore when they represent themselves to other people in society as a gender which is different from that biological sex, that they are wrong or lying. Right. So I mean, like that, and like the fact that he's got what, like 1.5 million viewers, and like there are a bunch of other people who make the same kind of arguments, right?
That's
so like
right.
The danger, I suppose, if we're just talking rhetorically here, right? We're putting to the side like the validity of these arguments, just rhetorically speaking. Like there is a harm in spreading those kind of ideas because they normalize the idea that we're not who we say we are, right? And they might make people believe that we're not real men, women, whoever, you know?
Right. No, I agree with you on that. And it's why I come to the educational. Now, I'm going to say this, 99%, maybe 90% of the world lives in biology. That's a fact. That's real. People will tell you that. What's the percentage of the trans community in the world? Like 0.5% or something? We're like such a... Yeah, we're like tiny little. So the way I built bridges across the world, people, like I travel the world. I sit next to people that are like, what do you do for a living? And I have to tell them because I'm straight up that way. And people will be like, some people will be like, never speak to me again. And some people will be like, wow, that's fascinating. I end up becoming friends with them. My point being is education. Now, Ben Shapiro isn't educated enough to have a conversation with me and you or whoever here, and then we can start to educate without being angry. The problem is no one wants to talk to us because we're so angry that people are misgendering us, calling us men and women. I don't care if someone calls me a lady. What I care about is you listening to why I had to transition to live male. That's the part that we really need people to understand. This is life-saving. It's not a joke, and it's not a costume, and it's not something that some of us are just doing in order to that's why I'm concerned with detransitioning, because I want all of us to be happy. I want everyone to have what I have. I have the most incredible life that I would never have if I did not transition to live as a man. And so that's what people need to understand. I am not in any way, shape, or form saying this is how you transition. I would never do that. I'm just concerned with how are we pushing this narrative that we're making, or how is biology not real? When people hear that, it shuts down the conversation. That's just my opinion and my experience in this conversation.
Okay, do you think that we should dictate our rhetoric and how we engage with other people just based on their perceptions of us, regardless of what the actual academic consensus is on the particular subject? Really?
Yes, I do, because it's the way you actually build a bridge, which means you actually get people to. So
we should disregard academia. I just want to make sure I'm.
I don't think disregard.
We should disregard it. Well, I mean, what do we do when there's a conflict?
Is the wrong word.
Well, what do we do when there's a conflict?
Disregard is the wrong word. What I'm saying is we need to sort of skip over that in order to build a bridge. Sometimes we can not have to use that situation because people are immediately going like this. Nope. It's a study. That's how it is. I'm not going to talk anymore.
Well, I'm not. I mean, like if there are other,
you're not.
Evidence.
People do it all the time. People do it all the time. It's just my experience with people. It's my experience. I find that one space with people where we can have a conversation. because sometimes you can't. What happens is this: we're just spinning out. We're just spinning out, and then there's no conversation, and then now we're all we've divided ourselves. I really want us to learn to have conversation, even though it's difficult conversation, and not me, us three here, the world. We need to get to the world so that they start to see we want to live our lives like everybody else. We are like everybody else. We just had to have a little detour here to make sure that our lives can be in this space. But people are seeing all kinds of stuff out there and using it against us, which is not okay. I'm not cool with that. So they're using children against us now. And we need to have the conversation. Why are more kids transitioning? Why are more kids thinking they're trans? What is happening? Why are we giving hormone blockers? We need to step up. It's our community. We're responsible to educate the world. Whether you want to agree with me on that, I personally believe we are responsible to educate the world.
No, I completely agree. I guess that just to summarize, and maybe I'll I'm not trying to like necessarily like change your mind. I'm just trying to share my perspective.
I don't think so.
My perspective, right? If we're looking at like the difference in our like I guess strategies, I am very, very skeptic to basing our rhetoric and how we do advocacy completely around other people's perceptions of us, because what that does is it puts us basically just at the whims of other people who aren't trans, who don't know our experience, right?
They don't.
And so I've tried to ground my rhetoric personally in empirical evidence to the best I'm able to, and then on like the trans, so like that's like the main point that I want to make with the evidence versus other people's opinions argument. With the young people argument with the children, right? I mean, let me ask you this question: do you think it's possible that there are more young people transitioning just because more trans people are represented in media compared to past history?
I do. I most definitely do. Yes, I do think it's kids can be influenced about that. Yeah, sure.
Well,
why not?
Like, what if it was all right? Like, let's say that historically, like, there's been the same amount of trans people like in the population, statistically speaking, like over the course of human history, it's always been 1%. All right.
Right.
But let's say that not everyone has realized that over the course of history. Like, there's been a lot of trans people who feel these feelings but don't know how to be able to like manifest them or express them, and they don't know what to make of them. Right. But now we're getting to a point now where, because there's like more representation in media, well, now people who previously didn't know as much might see like Kalvin or you or someone else and be like, oh my God, that's me. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And so it makes sense that there are like more people coming out as trans, not necessarily that we're like convincing people who are not trans to become it, but rather that more people who are just kind of realizing it. Does that make like, does that make sense?
100%. I agree with you on that, because again, let's go back to me. I didn't even have social media when I transitioned. This didn't even happen. When I transitioned, I was in the lesbian community. Oh my God, they hated me. They were like, later, dude, for you, like, you're abandoning us. I'm like, so being said, fast forward 10 years after that, so many of those gay women came at me and said, I want to transition. So I saw it already happening in that when you start to present things into a bigger space, people see it. And of course it becomes that. But that being said, I also believe there'll be collateral damage. I believe there'll be some kids who should not be transitioning, and that's detransitioners. And I'm listening to detransitioners, and I'm talking to them, and I'm seeing it become bigger. And I'm trying to understand why. Why are you I never thought. Did you ever think to detransition, Kalvin?
No.
Did you, Riley?
No, I didn't. Well, actually, I shouldn't. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that, because the thing is, like, going back and actually some of the, like, a lot of the, actually every source I talked about earlier, I mean, they talk about the reasons why the small number of people who detransition do, right? And most of them are related to like social factors, right? How their family and communities treat them. Like, if they're in the super conservative area and they come out and everyone's like, oh, we fucking hate you because we're a bunch of Southern Baptist Bible, whatever, right? And they realize like, oh shit, if I don't detransition, then like I might just get murdered, you know? Like, a lot of it is like very societally based, right? Like, and yeah, like, we do want to make sure that we're not like having people transition who otherwise aren't, and we're just like that's a valid concern. I guess I'm just
because they will use that against us. They will use it against us. They will say, see, they already are trying to do that. See,
but I also think detransitioners, there's a lot of them online that denounce the trans community, and I have a big issue with that. And a lot of them are these people like people like that have the same sort of ideas as Ariel and Abigail did in her book. It's really it's like, well, transitioning didn't work for
Appalling
me, and they
said
seem
Vosh
so
bad
spiteful
emoji
about
Vosh
it. They
yes.
seem so upset that, and it's for me. I see, on one hand, I see where you're coming from, Buck, because, and that's my opinion based on those detransitioners that denounce the trans community, and maybe I'm only seeing it because they're mainly FTM detransitioners that end up with that opinion. I think that there is something to say about, I think MTF people face more discrimination socially than FTM.
I agree with you. I totally agree.
There's more hate towards, early transition trans women. And I think, like Riley, I agree with your point that there's a lot of people that detransition because of their family, socially transphobic. And I think a lot of that, it probably is MTF people. I think most of those people, at least anyone that I've met that detransition.
Oh, MTF?
MTF, male to female. I'm
sorry, go on.
Actually, anyone I've ever met that detransitioned MTF did have real dysphoria, but they only detransitioned because of the social backlash.
Right.
Whereas a lot of FTM people that I've met that detransitioned really didn't have dysphoria, and then they become TERFs. So that's my problem. That's where I agree with you, Buck, though, is like, it's kind of like two-sided, because on one hand, yeah, we need to make sure people aren't medically transitioning if they don't have real dysphoria, but at the same time, and I know I'm guilty of this, though, I think that it's kind of like hard to dictate like who has dysphoria and who doesn't.
Right. Because if I say I have dysphoria, that's why mental health to me and having really proper therapy, mental health care can really I've never looked back. I went through so many years of healthcare back in the day when they didn't even know what to do with that. But I really equate my transition and how really powerful it's been for me is because I really did work on my mental health care a lot. And I really sort of made these things sort of work together on some level. So I'm a big, huge advocate for mental health care, but detransitioning could be a lot of things. It can be the social pressure. It can be the pressure of parents. That some of the FTM people that I spoke with who detransitioned, they said that they just weren't dysphoric. And they realized that after they started their transition and after they removed their breasts and had hysterectomies, and, that just makes me very sad because these are young kids, 20 years old, and they already sort of did this space that they can never get back their breasts and they can never get back the reproductive system. And, that just makes me sad because it did wonders for me. And I think it did wonders for you too. So when I see that, I just think, is it going to become bigger? Are we going to have something we're going to really have to deal with in the long run? And how do we deal with it so that people don't detrend? Why all three of us here never thought about it, and why are they thinking about it?
Well, I mean, it's not that I haven't thought about it. Let me ask you this question, because maybe this will clarify. Do you think that there is any way that we could implement trans health, like trans healthcare, where we could have absolutely none of those kinds of people or instances? Like, do you think that there's any way to completely avoid that?
What's your this is a question I was going to ask, literally what you just asked. How do you propose that we, and this is genuine, I just want to know, how do you propose that? Because you have this, if detransitioning is such an important issue to you, know what I mean? So you've talked about it a lot. What would your ideas be on like how we can prevent that without also discriminating against people?
Right.
And like, you know what I mean? Like, cause like I want to support detransitioners. I want to support them. I want the trans community to know that like we support them. You know what I mean?
We have to.
At the same time, it's very, very hard to support a lot of them. And this is my perspective as seeing a lot of FTM detransitioners that become TERFs. They don't support us. They go behind and they have so many bad things. So it's like, I want to support you, yes, and I want to acknowledge what happened, what you went through, and advocate for you, but you're not advocating for me. And
so no, I that doesn't happen with me. All the detransitioners for me never speak badly about it. They don't. But that being said, I think studying them, that's why I think we need to have studies around detran. Why? What made them go do it? Why would they do it? What made them even think they were trans? Why did they take such radical steps to do it? And then at what point did they decide, this isn't for me? So I think really studying why these people are doing that and why it's growing. And so again, we don't know the community because it's not just structured like the trans community. I think they're all over the place, and some of them detransition and go back into their other life or whatever. The ones you're dealing with are different than the ones I'm dealing with. I don't have that same backlash, and they're not being mean about it. They're just saying it didn't work out for me, and I don't hate it. It just was something I should have never done. And they're mad at themselves for doing it, and they're mad that people didn't help them, and they say that I didn't have. I would say 99% of the detransitioners I speak to did not have mental health care. And so they said that was one of the major factors that they think was in the reasoning why they detransitioned.
Buck, you said that we need to conduct studies, but you already earlier said that we can't trust studies that are available right now. Like, we have studies on this idea right now, like why people
No, I said no, that's not. I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. What I'm saying is studies are important and they should be from everywhere, not just from one space.
But it's not just one space. We have multiple.
Okay, great. So you send me all those studies and I'll send you all studies, and then we can do the whole detective thing together, because I want to learn what you have. And
do you have any right now? Like,
no, I don't. I have to go dig, and I wasn't prepared for that. If I would have been prepared, I would have slammed it to you, but I'm not prepared. I'm not that prepared.
So are you just wait, so I'm just asking because I want to be clear. So are you just assuming that those exist even if you don't have them?
I actually have them, but I do not have them in my face right now. So yes, I do have them. It's after we get off of this and we email each other, which we will do.
Okay.
I want to stay connected to you so that me and you can start to talk about this and give each other studies. And maybe I'll learn from your studies and you'll learn from my studies.
Okay.
Does
I mean, that's fine. Yeah. I actually have like a complete research document, so I can just
send
that
to
you like whenever you want.
Yeah. I wasn't even prepared to have a conversation with you. I was prepared to have a conversation with Kalvin.
You're fine.
So yeah, right on.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean for it to ever like turn to a debate or anything like that. I just wanted to have like a trans woman.
Look, you know what I mean? I want to debate. Debate is important, and I want Riley to challenge me, because remember what I said earlier? Challenge me. I want to challenge you back. I'm willing to change my mind, but it doesn't mean your studies are going to change my mind. My studies might change your mind or not change your mind.
Right.
But that being said, we can't be so hard-edged on everything. That's, I think, one of the major problems with our community is we become very hard-edged. And what I know is right and what you know is right, and that's not how it's going to be. And I do believe in studies, but I don't think we have enough studies. Does that make sense? And I don't think we have enough studies from all over the place. And I do think studies sometimes can be very biased about what's happening, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I guess I'll just clarify. I know I can come off as abrasive. I mean, like I competed in college national debate, and I coached college national. Like, I just tend to be I just tend to be like straight to the
excellent.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm in law school.
Didn't they take debate class out of universities? I heard.
I mean, like after where I went to school, actually, Rose College. Check them on the internet.
No, you're a badass. Right on, my friend.
Thank you.
So anyway, that's it. Let's have conversation out there, people. You can hate me all you want. I don't care. That means nothing to me. Hate is just a thing that happens because people misunderstand things, or they just get themselves into this space. I think we have to teach ourselves in this community not to hate, to disagree. Because again, we got to get to a better space, or we're just going to be so divided, things aren't going to change. I mean, look at this country. It's a mess. But
Buck, were asking about your opinion on Jk Rowling.
Yeah, okay, great.
I'm just going off the chat. I'm sitting here reading the chat.
Sure. So my JK thing is this. I don't think she is transphobic. And that being said, I think she's a woman who has an opinion. Now, this TERF thing is real. There are definitely TERFs out there. But I think TERF, I get called a TERF all the time. I get called transphobic.
What would you consider TERF? What would you consider transphobic, and what would you consider?
Yeah, I don't. Transphobic is too watered down now. Transphobic is somebody who actually hates transgender people. That's transphobia.
Like, what actions would warrant? What would a transphobic action be to you? Because I feel like you would label someone transphobic based on their actions and based on their words.
Words.
Yes. So what actions would warrant someone being called transphobic?
So again, my opinion of what's transphobic might be different than your opinion. I don't think there's an actual definition there. Phobia is fear. Well, right. And phobia is fear. So it's a fear of trans people. Right. But then fear creates this sort of delusional space where you're like, trans people are going to take us over. They're all going to take over this system. And that's what transphobia is to me, not understanding what a trans person is and how they play in the world and why it's important for people to transition. Now, that being said, Jk Rowling has fear, but she has fear as a woman. And I've seen things where she's written that she's not in any way, shape, or form hateful to trans people. What she fears is space being taken. So I hear that as somebody who was raised and who grew up as a woman. And I fought for women's rights when I was a gay woman, and I was very versed in all of that stuff. So I see fear. I wanted to look above and beyond this attack on her that she is transphobic, burn her at the stake. I don't think that does our community any good. I think that we look like we're actually like burning people at the stake. I want to have a conversation. Why do you feel this way, JK? What is the fearful part? And why would you think trans people would take over your space? If we don't, again, have conversation, we don't really know what the problem is. We only know that she's fearful of her space being taken over. And that's what I saw. So for me, I was like, wait a minute, is this actually transphobic, right? Is her fear creating transphobia, or is her fear saying, I as a woman don't understand this and I want to talk about this, and how can we coexist in the world together? Coexisting is the way we will make change, not by running people over, but by coexisting.
Can I ask you something? Because I mean, like, there's this dispute about like what it means to be or do something transphobic. Can you, in your opinion, can you do something transphobic without necessarily having a transphobic intent?
Sure, probably, yes. I think you could do that with homophobia too. I think you could do that with all kinds of phobias, for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Again, education, right? Yeah. We need to educate. Because that's why people get fearful, because they're not educated to understand. We're not going to take your space over. I don't want your space. I want to coexist with you. I want to, we can't override people's spaces. So again, I also use that terminology, trans men or trans men. And I use that in a way that says, I say that for a lot of reasons, but one being medical. If we just take over and we're just men and we just get into this space and I have to go to the doctors and I have to explain to myself, like, it's going to be we have different medical needs. We need to really keep that on the table.
I don't think anyone is telling you that you can't like say that you're a trans man. Like,
no. What I mean is like, trans women are women and trans men are men.
What do you think about people? Yeah, with that. What do you think about that? Because like this is my okay. When you say that though,
yeah,
I would not go around making the distinction that I am a trans man versus a man. And I know people do that a lot. There's a lot of debate about trans man. Should trans people have to say I'm a trans man instead of a man? And my opinion on that is that if like cis men and trans men, even though they're different, they're both men. Like it's in the name. So if as a trans man, like you shouldn't have to denote that you're trans.
No. And I don't. You know that I live 100% male. Everything of mine has been changed to male. So I do live male.
I'm just asking because I hear people say that a lot.
No, I never say I'm a trans. I mean, I don't know if I ever do that. But that being said, what I'm trying to say is that if we just try to take over space and say we're all men, we're not. We're different kind of men. And so we need to really understand that we as trans men are men, but we're a different kind of man. And that's very important that we don't lose that. And our transgender experience is very important.
I don't think anyone's saying that, right?
Like, oh yeah, some people
in the
are
same
saying
well,
that.
I mean, like in the same way, all right, would you say that a black man is a man? Like, I'm just asking you, like, would you say that a black man is a black man?
Well, that's bringing in race now.
Well, I mean, like, it's a similar kind of thing. Like, no one is saying that a trans man that like you're not a trans man, but just that like trans men are men, just like black men are men, and just like it's just an additional descriptor to describe what is fundamentally a man, right? Like that's all that people are saying. Yeah,
I don't know about that. How do you know that?
I mean, do you see any like I can't even conceive of a different conception. No one is saying that trans people aren't trans. Like that's a straw man.
No. I don't think that. What I think is that people are saying like trans men are men. What that does is that makes people think we are trying to override space and get it, or trans women are women.
I think that's speculating. I think that's just
not from what I read. Not from what I read on people's comments about it. So is my experience and my opinion states that. That's what that is. I'm saying from my own experience of reading things and seeing what people say. That's what I'm saying.
So I can say, because like I also tend to, like Kalvin said before, right? Like if we're gonna place me on political spectrum, I tend to be more progressive, more left leaning, all that good stuff, right? Like so I am the atypical kind of person that would make these arguments, right? Like you want to talk about these arguments, I'm the one that I am the person that makes them, right? And like no one, especially like anyone similar to me, is going to make the argument that like trans men aren't men, right? Just that they're a different kind of men, right? Like men all the same, right? But in the same way that like black men or like any kind of race
Right.
of man is a man, right? Like it's just an
Right.
additional descriptor, you know? And
That's
that's
right. And that's exactly right. But people don't think that in the other world
Okay.
out there. 99% of the world.
I see a comment from Samantha Lux. I know she also makes videos about she's a trans woman, and she says we're not overriding space. Women's spaces are trans women's spaces, and I can see what you're coming from, Buck. You know what I mean? I know what you're saying. But one issue I see, and JK and Ariel does this as well. I think that a lot of times I think that cis women have this big issue with allowing trans women into women's spaces, and I think that yes, but I think more trans women are respectful of like and can acknowledge where differences are between cis women and trans women. But I think it's really important to do that in a way that doesn't other trans women or like that doesn't like try to something Ariel does a lot is she's like trans women are women, but she makes a lot of trans women feel like she's more of a woman than they are because they're cis. And I think that it's important to recognize that just because you're a cis woman, you're not more of a woman than a trans woman.
No, that is actually not okay with me. I'm not on board with that because again, we can go back to what makes you a man and what makes you a woman. I've been fighting that fight forever with my vagina. So that said, it doesn't matter. That what I'm trying to say is what I'm hearing from the rest of the world and their fear of overriding spaces. That's what they feel. So all I'm saying is by distinguishing us and saying, we're not trying to override your space at all. We're trying to coexist. This is a really great word. To coexist means that we find space for all of us and we don't run over other people's space and we don't say you aren't this and you're not really a woman and you're not really a man and you're just a turf and you're just, what happens is that. And, it's just my experience in the world. Once I learned to just laugh at someone calling me a woman, I eased into the world a lot better. And I just realized not everyone's going to like me. Not everyone's going to be okay with me. Not everyone's going to ever believe I'm actually a dude. And I had to learn to walk the world that way. And it's been huge for me. And it's been a huge success for me to understand that once you just kind of find your space in the world and not override other people's spaces or try to coexist with them, then things happen that are pretty amazing.
So I actually want to hold on. So like, I think that this idea of coexistence is great. Like the idea of like having spaces, like there's no overriding happening. We're just trying to get to the space. Like, I think that that's a really good idea. I want to take that back to like the Jk Rowling thing. Because I think that a big problem that a lot of people have with her is that like, this is overwhelmingly where the trans community is trying to head. And with JK trying to represent effectively like a non-existent or like a non-realistic fear, right? That trans women are trying to like invade or take over women's spaces, right? The impression is that like by spreading this idea, which is misinformation, right? Like it's not something that's happening, but by spreading it as if it's a valid fear to have, that could constitute transphobia, right?
That's right. You're totally right about that.
Right. And so I want to ask you then, like, do you think that, like, based on that idea, like, even if she, like, again, like, I'll even acknowledge that, like, she could be, like, completely, purely in her heart of hearts, like, the bestest trans ally possible. But do you think it's possible that, like, that kind of an action and repeated actions would indicate that, like, those are transphobic actions?
Well, for sure, they could be considered transphobic actions, but again, intent. We always have to look at intent. What are my intentions right now? What are your intentions? Are we trying to figure this out? Or are we just going to be like, slam, that's it, fuck off? No, we're going to be like, come on, these are concerns. And so again, our concerns mean something to us. So we need to listen to what her concerns are. Yes, they come off transphobic if you want to look at it that way. I'm trying not to look at it that way. And I'm trying to look at it with different eyes than what everybody else is looking at. So that being said, there we go again. I'm coming to it in a different angle than you are. And so, because I want to find a place where we don't have to burn people at the stake and we need to, she's powerful. If we can educate her to understand us, that could change everything for us. But if we just want to take her out, it's just going to be like, okay, see ya. And then we could actually, we could actually maybe try to educate and bring her over and say, hey, we're not what you think we are, or you don't need to be fearful of trans women. They're beautiful, amazing people.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I agree with that. I guess that the reason why I focus on this, and maybe I'll bring in some legal principles, right, from my law school, my criminal, like, even the work that I did this past summer. I worked with the Attorney General's office.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
You went to law. You're going to law school?
Yeah, currently in law school right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. But basically, like, the way that I try to look at these things is objectively rather than subjectively, right? You talked about intent, and I think that intuitively intent can sound very appealing, but the thing about it is that, like, someone can tell you their intent, and, like, in the worst case scenario, they could lie to you, right? Like, I don't love going off of intent, because anyone can tell me what their intent is, but at the end of the day, like, all they have to do to refute my like, we can inductively try to inference out what someone's intent is based on the evidence, but, like, at the end of the day, like, we aren't mind readers. We can't know what's going on inside of our head, right? And so practically speaking, like, what's best to do so we can reach, like, definitive answers on, like, what do we want to, like, refer to this as, or, like, what's the best way moving forward. I try to look at these things objectively, right? Like, what objective criteria do we have for actions which we want to label as a community as transphobic, right? Because like, if we try to incorporate intent, and I get it, like, intent is very important, and I'm not trying to morally impugn her here, right? Like, I'm not saying that, like, she's a personally bad person for doing these things. I just want to make sure that, like, we are able to, like, have objective criticisms, and then, like, Now I will say, like, the overwhelming amount of criticism that she has received, and the fact that she's, like, doubled and tripled down on them, now that seems to very heavily indicate that she is married to these opinions, right? But, like, if she wants to have, like, an actual conversation with people about these opinions and, like, meaningfully move on them, that's fine, and I want to invite that. I just don't see that being something realistic based on what she's done so far, and her, like, continued inability to willing to listen to people. Does that make sense?
100% it does. 100%. And I get what you're saying. That's why we need to really try to get her. And I see what you're saying. She is continually saying the same things that she needs to say because it's what she feels. But she's not hearing that it's hurting people, what you're saying. And so but we're attacking. We also have to take some responsibility for that. We are actually attacking in a way that's like, whoa. I'm like, wow. So instead, and I don't know if it's the sign of the times, right? Can people have, like, any kind of opinion without getting run over? Or can we have a conversation that says this and this and this? It doesn't feel like that to me. It always feels very black and white now. And it just feels like if you don't have this opinion, if you don't have this at heart, and this is not what you're going to think, then just get out of my way. And I don't know. I don't work that way.
Do you think that if people initially try to educate someone on a particular subject, and that initial, like, let's say that people tried to educate Jk Rowling on this subject when she started, like, a while back, she started, like, you know, inkling that, like, oh, she had these feelings, right? Let's say that people tried to educate her, and she was just like, no, I don't care. I have my opinions. They're my opinions. They're not changing. Do you think that gives people, like, more leeway to be able to have, like, more vitriolic responses on social media as another way to be able to try to get at her?
Well, because you're going to get pissed because they're not listening. Like, yeah, of course you're going to be like, well, you're not listening to me. Then forget it. I'm shutting down the conversation. Yeah. But did that actually happen?
I suppose I can't say. I'll give you. I will grant that. I can't say that anyone. My inclination is that that's probably, now the reason I bring that up is not to say that, like, that's necessarily what happened, but to demonstrate that I think that's the mentality that a lot of people are operating from. It's very hard because we're not talking about someone who's just like your average Joe Schmo on the street making these kinds of criticisms. We're talking about one of the most influential people. Like, she has what, like 16 million people
I don't know,
followers, insane following on social media, right? Like, we're talking about someone who will not be reached by the average trans person. Like, I will probably, like, for as much as I would like to, I'll probably never talk to her. I'll never be able to express my criticisms of her. And so it seems like in social media, the best way to be able to levy criticisms against her, at least for most people, is to try and, like, say things as loudly as possible, to use social media, right? I think that can be perceived as an attack by her, but I also want to ask you, what's the alternative? Oh no, Buck, are you there?
Sorry, my connection. I swear to God, I paid my bill.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Can you imagine? Slam. No,
you're all good. You're all good.
Really, I wish I knew. I mean, God, it would be amazing if you could get her on your channel, Kalvin. It would be insane. Well, but are we reaching out to her?
Well, you talk to people like Abigail, and you know what I mean? So this is why I see this production as important, and why I brought Riley here, because the more perspectives you have, like, there's probably people I talk to that you don't talk to, Buck. There's probably people Riley talks to that we don't talk to. And as, like, trying to be mature as possible. You know, I mean, I've not been mature in the past, but I know, you know, I've been trying to be. So I want to get everyone's perspective, and I feel like that's important because, you know, now you have our perspective. So if you talk, if you you got a big voice too, Buck. You say that I'm very influential, but I'm sure way more people in the trans community know who you are than I am.
Yeah.
So you're
well,
gonna.
I don't know about that.
I think
no, you're known by everyone.
I just have a different demographic. I have a different. I'm old, you know. I am the old. I am the old trannies over here.
Think about the fact that there's, you know, older people that have been, you know, involved in the community are listening to you, and there's people like JK that will probably. I think JK will be more opening to talk to someone like you than us because you're older. You know, you more known in the community. So that's why I'm saying, like, if I talk to JK, I'm gonna bring up Riley's concerns just as much as I bring up your concerns. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you talk to Abigail, you're gonna, you know, bring up your concerns, our concerns, everything.
That's right.
So okay, and a lot of the people in the chat, I'm sorry to like, because like the debate doesn't start for 40 minutes. People are just like bitching about it. The debate doesn't start. Okay, so even if we go a little over than what we thought, you know, we're gonna make.
We gotta go soon because
we're gonna make sure we're done by this. But a lot of people in the chat are asking about he/him lesbians, and I don't know either of your opinions.
What's that? What's a he/him lesbian? I don't even know what that is.
Someone who identifies, I'm assuming, as male in some way, whether that's like non-binary and then like sort of male or a man on the spectrum of like non-binary, or someone that identifies as a trans man that also identifies as a lesbian.
Oh, I see. I didn't even know that existed.
So,
okay, so that being said, that's again sexuality versus gender, right? So yeah, well, how can you be a lesbian and be male?
well, I guess
It's a question. I'm not in any way.
I agree with you on that one, but
I'm not in any way like making any kind of problem here. I'm just saying how. Just explain to me how. Because a lesbian is a woman who loves a woman. Now, if it's a trans woman or a woman or anyone who identifies female, I don't care who you are, my dog or whatever, you could be a lesbian. That said, it's a woman and a gay man. I also identify as a gay man, so I like men. So so that's, even though I'm a trans man, I was born female, I like dudes, and so I'm consider myself a gay man. So I don't understand a man identifying as a lesbian, so I don't mean any insulting from it. Do you?
I think I get it a little bit, just because I had a therapist who was, from what I understand, he/him lesbian. Basically, like this was totally a thing down in Tennessee of all places. But essentially, as I understand it, there's a pretty like it's something specific. Again, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't fall into this demographic. This is just based on my knowledge of it. There's just there's a tradition or kind of like a trend in the lesbian community where like butch lesbians or people who are like pretty masculine might go by he/him pronouns. It doesn't mean that they're not women. It just means that sometimes they go by he/him. Right.
Well,
I think that's
that.
it.
Well, I kind of did that back in the day when I was a les, and I would just be like, I'm a dude. But, you know, no one believed me back in the day.
Yeah, but so I think that's
I was
essentially...
still looking like a woman, though.
Yeah, but I think that's essentially it, right? Like, they're just lesbians who are, like, super butch, and they just sometimes use he/him because, like...
But does that bother the lesbian community? Because also, you know...
Some.
Yeah, of course. Nothing is ever smooth.
It's been, like, something that's existed for a while. Like, actually, as far as, like, the trans discourse goes, heavy quotations, it's something that's, like, not... Like, it's something that's, like, relatively older, from what I understand.
Right, okay, but you know, I could see how lesbians could be a little bit upset about that because, you know, that's their space on some level.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't want to, like, again, that's not my personal,
that's
not my lived experience, right? So I'm not going to talk too much about it, right?
No, exactly. It's not my lived experience either. But what I'm saying is that I think I could see why somebody could get upset if they were being upset by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, I live binary. I'm just a dude who lives in binary. I don't, you know, there's a whole new space out there. I just transitioned to be a man and live my life that way. And that's how I live my life. I'm not any of it, but I respect everyone's choices of identity. So it really bothers me that people think I hate non-binary people. It's just a weird thing that happened that I don't understand why. But here, live on Kalvin's thing, I'm telling the world I love non-binary people. I have no issues whatsoever.
Are there any other topics of conversation that you see people put words in your mouth? Because I do want to give you the opportunity. Like, if you have something that people say you believe a lot and it's just not true, you know.
Well, I'd say the non-binary thing is so big. It's like it boggles my mind, to be honest with you.
Like, what about it?
I don't understand. But other than that, you know, there's people who just like me and just say all kinds of things. But I don't have the time or day for that nonsense. It's like, I don't care if you like me. I really don't. I care about making things change in the world before I die, and that's it. And you know, I'm getting too old to worry about whether or not people like me or not.
So I think that part of it comes from the idea, and this is just in my chat. I'm asking people for sources right now because otherwise I don't have any on me at the moment.
Okay, right on.
I'm told that there are times when you will tweet about non-binary people in particular. Again, I'm like, until someone gives me
never done it. Never done it. Please tell them to show me that tweet.
Yeah. Well, people are saying that you do it like pretty regularly, but again, like
one that I've seen. I don't know. You could have, but I don't remember. Not one that has blown up. There's just some of your tweets that have kind of blown up a little bit. I just had never even heard you talk about it. So I don't
know. And you know, when I was on ContraPoints, like that just blew it up. That just blew it.
What did you say about ContraPoints?
Oh no. Yeah, you
remember
can say,
I read.
I am familiar. Yeah.
I just love this shit, man.
I don't know about it.
Oh god.
Well, I played a part on she contacted me if I would read 20 seconds of a thing that were John Waters. So I played John Waters in something that she did. This is how not connected to the internet I am. And then I just read it, and the next thing you know, people just fucking nailed her for me being on the show because I'm anti-non-binary. I'm like, what? It just blew. Yeah, it was a thing that happened. But this goes to show you that mob sort of mentality. It's easy to push people into a thought process on the internet.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like I'm friends with Natalie. I've talked to her about that. It's actually
awesome.
It's actually interesting talking to you about this because we talked about it before. But yeah, no, trust me. Like I am continuously critical of people over on my area of the political internet, right?
Good for you.
Because I do think that kind of behavior is incredibly toxic. Now let me ask you a question. Maybe this. I mean, hey, maybe the non-binary thing. Maybe it can all be swept away. Let me just ask you the direct question. Do you think that non-binary people are like a authentic trans identity?
Yes, I do. And let me tell you why I think that is. That is because before I said transgender is this, and it was me, but it has changed over time. Now, we all have changed our opinions on things, and if you haven't, that's weird. Everyone changes their opinion over time. That being said, I realized transgender is an umbrella term. I did not understand that at the time. So what I said is non-binary people are not transgender, they're non-binary. That's exactly what I said. And it was no dig on them or anything. It was just saying that they're not transgender because transgender is this and non-binary. How can you be non-binary and be transgender? I was trying to be logical. That being said, it's now an umbrella term. Take it. Do whatever you need to do with it. It is why I call myself a transsexual, because I am not part of that situation, but I respect it. So yes, I will tell you that I did say that, but it was not my intention for people to think I was anti-non-binary. It was for me saying transgender is something different than non-binary. As I realized it grew into an umbrella term, I just realize now all of these different identities are under the umbrella term of transgender. And that's why I claim transsexual as opposed to transgender.
Okay, because yeah, I mean, like some people have sent me some, like for example, there's one where you said,
"Come on, that fast, man."
Oh yeah, listen, my chat's fucking on it.
Right on.
There was one from March 25th of this year where it says, nobody cares that you identify as non-binary. What we care about is that you respect our choice of gender binary.
That's right.
We'll move forward.
That's not anti-non-binary. I don't care. That's exactly what I just said. I don't care if you're non-binary. I don't care. I don't care what you claim to be. A purple unicorn with flowers growing out of your ear. I don't care. I care that we respect, because people were coming at me at transsexual. They were like, that's derogatory and all antiquated. Can you imagine people saying that? Like, that's my space. That's where I come from.
I mean, like I am of the opinion that, like, all right, so I'll clarify, because like my chat might fight me with me a little bit. I don't mind if people identify as transsexual. If you want to like have something which differentiates people like with a more medicalized trans experience from other people who are transgender.
It's just my experience. You don't have to do it. Like nobody else has to do it.
I mean, I don't know, like, I
it's
also
just
agree
an older
that, like,
term. It's an older term and a term I feel connected to, because I literally we used to call it a sex change. That's what we call it.
Oh God, the internet.
Oh no, I feel bad. It'll load in
there goes my...
Buck.
Oh no.
Wait, Buck, you kind of cut out.
You're cutting out a lot, as in like, I think that we can all agree that the person who really won this debate was Comcast. Oh shit.
Someone said, "Wonder if Ariel's watching."
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Ariel's watching, but you know I'm friends with Ariel.
What?
No, Ariel's watching, and I'm friends with her, and it doesn't matter how you're allowed to have your opinion about her.
No, I want to say if Ariel's watching. I'm not trying to.
No, you didn't say. Actually, I'm getting closer to the router. You didn't say anything. I think that could be misconstrued as mean. You were not. You were just. You were honest about your thoughts. That's all. But should we go watch the presidential debates, kids?
Is that
yes. Oh yeah. Well, it's starting at what time? 9 p.m. EST, and it's what?
It's 6, and it's 5:30 here, so 6.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, Bucky. I know we've gone over the time, so if you have to go, that's fine. I just don't.
Yeah, let's wrap it up with some important questions that you have. I wanted to see if I could get my connection better. Did you have any, like, really something that's weighing on anybody's mind that wants to? You know, I can join you again. I super appreciate you guys having conversation with me. We don't all agree on everything, which is so important. I think it adds a lot of depth and perspective to our community.
Right. I'm trying to. I don't think I have any personal questions. I don't know if Riley does, but I'll look at the chat here. And also, I have my moderators in the chat. Like Noah, if people have good questions, just text that to me directly. So I'm just waiting for people to see.
Let me. Do you mind if I ask you? This is actually just like I'm always thinking about like responsible rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that, for example, like there are a lot of things that we've talked about tonight, and like there are other people who we have alluded to, Ariel, Blair White, a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
Who have opinions that. I mean, like some of them, like I vehemently disagree with. I'll be that clear. I'll make that clear. I understand that you might disagree with more than me, but like I'll make it clear. But I think that like one thing that could be said is that like regardless of what your opinion is, I think that there is a dangerous risk of using such rhetoric which could cause harm to other people.
Yeah.
For example, I know that Blair recently put up a video about like a trans athlete, and it turns out like there were a bunch of like blatant misrepresentations in that video. So I just want to ask you, like, do you think that there is also a discussion, and maybe this is something to talk about moving forward, but about like responsible rhetoric to make sure that even if you have different opinions from mine, that we do need to make sure that we're not doing things which could cause other people harm, right? Like, do you think
of course, 100, all three of us here have responsibility as voices, 100%. We're still allowed to talk about our opinion, but I do think there's ways that you could do it where it's not hurtful, right? The trans women in sports is very hurtful. It's a very, very deep conversation.
You don't think trans women shouldn't be in?
Well, again, I'm going to tell you, I was a female athlete. I was a very high-ranking female athlete. I had sponsorships. I was training for Olympic. I was like high end. And that being said, that was back in the day when we ran against USSR. I can tell you what, those women, they look like trans men. I'm not even kidding. But so that said, it's a difficult conversation because we need to have it because trans women should be able to compete. But then are we listening to also, cis women? Are we listening to what their concerns are? And they have concerns, and they're valid concerns.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. So again, how do we make it work for all of us? Not just some of us, all of us. And so, let's just talk about it. Trans women should be competing in sports, but how do we make it social?
In women's sports. In women's sports.
Yes. Okay. But how do we do it? How do we do it?
I mean, this could be a whole nother conversation. I don't want to, there is like some research done in this area, right?
Yes, of course there is.
For like a really good example, if we're talking about like trans women, again, like this is a whole conversation, but like specifically, so if we're talking about like trans women who have been on HRT for like over a couple of years, especially if they started before like they would have, like before the age of 16 or something, like when they would have hit puberty otherwise, right? Like there's overwhelming evidence that like, it's perfectly fine to let them compete in women's sports, right? Like,
London is at no advantage against a cis woman in a sport. I'm going based off that. London, my friend London transitioned really pretty young, and I'm like, London, different. This is the way too, girl. But you're not competing in no male sports, girl. I can tell you that. No,
that's different. That's what Riley just said. That's different. Somebody at a young age.
People saying they shouldn't, and I'm sure obviously Riley agrees with it. I'm saying you do too. London's not having an unfair advantage. So how do like you were talking about, how do we make it fair?
Right. But somebody who's transitioning at 40 or 30, who's already structurally, in that male space, come on, we have to have a really, really logical conversation around that.
Speaking
of
studies. Speaking of London, she just asked me to ask you. Some people were asking how do trans women impede on cis women's rights? Like what rights do you think are impeded on, and like how are they not protected?
So I don't know if it's rights that I'm hearing. It's more that they're concerned with certain things that they feel uncomfortable with, like locker rooms or going, those things. And I'm not saying that has nothing to do with me. I'm not in that space. I'm reiterating what other people are. I'm telling you what other people are saying that I'm hearing for the fear of women. And what they're saying is this is the fear they have. And then they pull up things like crazy men who dress like women who are, serial killers or things like that as a representation of trans women. Now that's not fair. That's not fair. And I am not on board with that. But we still have to listen to the fear of women and what that fear is in order to be able to have the conversation. Say, you should not be fearing. We have to change that fear. How do we change the fear? By letting them see that they shouldn't be fearful and that we're not invading your space, or trans women just want to coexist with you and they're women. And how do, so again, everything is based on fear. That everything.
Well, can I comment on that for a quick second?
Sure.
Because I do, I can agree with the basic principle of accounting or wanting to be accessible to people's fears, right? But I think that we have to caveat that by making sure that we're being accessible to people's reasonable fears, right? If we base how we organize society around every single fear that exists, then that's just opening up a giant can of worms, right?
That's right.
And the thing is here, right?
Fear is based in transphobia. The fear is based in transphobia.
Yeah, it is based in transphobia, 100%. Because again, people don't understand. They're scared of trans women. But why are they scared of trans women?
But I was gonna say, not only is it based in transphobia, right? Because there's no empirical evidence that any of these fears of for example, trans predators in bathrooms, there have been studies that have debunked these time and time again. But also that this is a vastly minority opinion. There have been surveys that have been conducted that have shown that most cis women don't really care about trans women and changing rooms, sports, whatever. Most cis women just don't care. It's just a very loud minority, people people over in the UK or Wolf or various organizations here in the US that are vastly disproportionately louder than the average person, but which are not representative of the average cis woman, right? So I agree that we want to be able to account for people's fears, but it's not it's not actually supported by evidence, and B, most people just don't have this fear. Most people just don't care. Everyone just wants to take a piss, right?
But it's always it's always the loudest. We can say that about our community. It's always the loudest voices that get the most looks or the most hearing. So the louder in that community are the ones voicing their fears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we still need to confront those fears. We still need to sort of be the bigger person and talk about those fears that they have, and it's saying, why do you fear that? How can we help so you don't have those fears? And how can we start to move forward in the world? Because we're not going away. That's the one thing people need to understand. We aren't going anywhere. So how do we now make it comfortable for all of us to belong? When I go to the airport, I want to be able to use the toilet like everybody else, and I'm not going to the women's room. So how do we make it? Just so you know.
Yeah. No,
but that said, of course, people are going to be. It's just part of changing the world. We are changing the world. You know that. All of us are. The whole trans community is changing the world, and we want to do it in a way that makes it comfortable for all of us to exist in the world, not just some of us.
Yeah, and I get that. I guess I just don't want. I just want to make sure that we also acknowledge that not every single person that we're dealing with, and especially a lot of these people, not all of them are good faith actors. Not a lot of them can be meaningfully moved, right? There are people who I will argue with for hours upon hours. There is nothing I can say, no evidence I can present to them that will ever change their mind.
You're right.
And I think that for a lot of these people, especially the disproportionately small minority, let's be real, a lot of them are just transphobic. A lot of them will just look at you, and no matter what you say to them, will think the same thing about you until until the day they die, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't think that is real. And I understand like wanting to try and reach every single person that we can. That's what I try to do. I try to reach as many people as I can. But there's also some people who like there's literally nothing that you can say in the entirety of the human language and the entirety of like any language that will convince them against their bigoted views, right? So
no, that's right. You're talking about my father, by the way. My father was the same way. Can you imagine him still like calling me she and the girl name?
Oh,
Laura?
my fucking God, yeah.
Like I'm all dad. People think you're nuts. By the way, we're literally in a restaurant. But he finally got like okay with it after years and years and years of me showing up and just being there. So I do have actual experience of changing somebody's mind over time who was just so shut down and would not change their mind around it. So, you know, again, my experiences are going to be different than your experiences, and the way I want to do things is going to be. And these are the things we need to respect in our community. We need to respect the ways we do things might be different, and it might not be. But I think the bottom line is we're all on board here to make change, and we're all on board here to make it better for all of us to live and for the future generations of trans people, because they're coming. Whether people like it or not, they're coming and they're here. So how do we make it better?
That's a very fair point to make.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's all I'm trying to do is trying to improve the world.
I know that. I respect you a lot, right? You seem awesome, Riley. So I think me and you are going to be good friends, just so you know.
Thank you, Buck. I appreciate it.
No, seriously, I really appreciate you guys. And I want to go watch the presidential debates because this country needs I'm going to work on getting you Abigail on your show, Kalvin. And I'm also going to reach out to Jk. I've never done it, but I will do that. I would love to get her on your show.
Well, I mean, I would either or, you know what I mean? I would love it, you know.
Or maybe even Riley. Maybe Riley is the person to do it.
I mean, hey, listen. I'll talk. Like, I think that this is this is a battle to be held by like a lot of people, right? Many hands makes a small whatever.
I think it's important to have, because not all trans people have the same perspectives on everything, which is why I feel like the three of us have pretty good spectrum of beliefs here. You know what I mean? So
we totally do. We totally do. You know, again, we're coming from other angles, and this is what I want the world to see. And they just saw something that I think brought us all together, even though people, whatever, they want to have their thoughts. You just said it, Riley. You're not always going to be able to change people's minds. Move over to the next person. You know what I mean? And find that next person. And then eventually things will roll. So I really appreciate you having me on, Kalvin, and Riley taking time with me. It means a lot. And
you know, it was nice to talk to you, Buck. I haven't talked to you in a while. You know, I was excited. Sometimes I go into debates or discussions with people. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to talk to this person. Like,
I hear you.
Get an F in the chat for Clarabelle. Where'd Clarabelle go? Where is she? But yeah, it's nice to talk to you. And everyone, make sure you go follow Buck over on where are you most active? Twitter.
I would say these days Twitter is so insane.
Twitter, Instagram.
But Instagram, you know, I'm really limiting my social media for a while. Just, you know, I got a kid, I got a life going on here. I'm creating cannabis for the
That's
future.
probably healthy, right? Like everyone should probably limit their social media usage, to be perfectly honest. Twitter's not healthy.
That it's true. And also this guy wants to retire in a couple of years, just so you know.
Oh yeah.
That's my plan, and that's why I mean cannabis. Sorry?
How many years have you been on T-Buck?
25 years. I'll be 26.
When did you stop noticing? Do you still have any things that affect you from testosterone? Like, how long did it take for T to have no effect and it's just completely constant?
You know, I inject testosterone every week, and I've been doing it for 25 years.
Sorry? I probably haven't done it for 3 months. I forget.
Okay, yeah, no, that's okay. You don't have to. But for me,
I don't intend to be off T. I'm just lazy.
Oh, right. I know that happens. I miss my shots, but I feel different when I don't feel good when I miss my shots. Do you feel okay? Like, no, do you feel like down or?
Oh, no, not really. No.
Yeah, I totally do.
I would have at first, but like 3 or 4 years into it, like I don't really think it affects.
And then how long have you been transitioning for?
I've been about 2 years at this point.
2 years.
A little bit over. We're going about 2 and 2.5.
You need to watch our transition video because it's just insane.
Oh,
you look so different. You look so different. It's just
listen. I mean, like speaking of the whole trans sports thing. I mean, I used to be a fucking like college football athlete, right? Like I used to be a very, very different person. Or I mean, like physically, like I actually meant like if you were to know me like a couple of years ago, like personality wise, I'm very similar in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's been a ride, it's been a journey. But I feel like like a lot better of a person after everything's been said and done. So,
oh no, I see your confidence level, like, and that's why people need to see that. My confidence level went out through the roof. I would not be this guy if I did not transition. I would not have anything I have right now if it wasn't for living as male. And so I think, Kalvin, too, you show a lot of the real responsible stuff that you show in really transitioning how it's made you this person. And that's what people need to see out there. You know, you're not just playing around, it's your life. And yeah, I've watched you grow over the years. It's, you know, powerful. It's powerful. It is powerful. And we can't forget that. We're very, on some level, we're so privileged to be able to do this and be able to be the people we need to be. You know, I travel the world. I go to Indonesia, Malaysia. They kill trans people all the time. Last time I was there, 10 trans women. Sorry?
What are you doing there?
Oh, I speak. I'm a public speaker. So I travel the world speaking to organizations, you know, corporations, things like that. And in Indonesia, they killed 10 trans women right in the middle of the street, right there.
Are you scared to go there? Ever?
No, I wasn't scared because look at me. That's the advantage and the privilege I have to walk the world really masculine and nobody ever knows. All my passport, everything is male. So it's a privilege I don't take lightly.
Right. Well, I think I don't think there's much else then that I have to say. I mean, I know a lot of people were saying, you know, was Riley supposed to moderate? Like, I wanted to have Riley here to talk too. So it wasn't just the intention for her to be a moderator. No one thinks she just like overstepped a boundary. I asked Riley to come. I'm only saying this because of the chat. I asked Riley to come in and talk too. I asked her to.
No, we let the lady talk. It's awesome. Way to go. I'm all about that.
Yeah,
that's a gentleman. You're a gentleman, Kalvin. Right on.
And I mean, yeah, I definitely, again, like I know I can sometimes come off heated. I hope it was all taken in good faith, and obviously, I'm not trying to like personally attack anyone or anything like that.
I never felt attacked. Ever. Cool. I don't feel attacked. You want to have a conversation with me? You know, anyone can feel attacked if they just aren't grounded around themselves. I'm very confident in myself, and if you didn't attack. But let's go watch the presidential debate.
Yeah.
I'll be right there.
And then let's talk later, kids. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys a lot. Have a beautiful night. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. You too,
We'll
Buck.
talk soon. Email me, Riley.
All right, we'll do. I will message you on Twitter so I can find your email.
Yeah, right on. Do that.
All right.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.